What's up? This is Teague. At the end of summer, I gotta get my bike from here in Portland, Oregon, where I am now on winter break, to Maine. I didn't want to fly it. You gotta take the train. Can't take the train from Portland, Oregon to Spokane because they don't have the right cargo car. So I biked to Spokane, then took the train, then biked a little bit more. This is Dirtbag 2. Enjoy.
Be careful, out in the middle of nowhere.
Okay, I love you.
Make good decisions. I love you.
Love you too. Alright, so this bike that was all light and nice is now, it's very heavy! I departed the house and made my way to the Springwater Corridor for a familiar commute eastward. Following the old Columbia River Gorge Highway, I dropped down from Corbett and biked past all the touristy shit. The last time I biked this far down the gorge was my first real long bike ride, which was a total accident. I planned to bike out and back to Eagle Creek, but there was a huge gravel descent that I hadn't planned on, so I took an alternative route home which brought the distance up to 170 kilometers. This area looked a lot different since the last time I saw it before the fire damage of 2017. It was sad to see all the closed trailheads, but it seemed like the forest was recovering well. I rolled back onto the Columbia River bike trail and followed the ruins of the old highway to Cascade Locks. The last time I had to cross the Bridge of the Gods, it was bucketing rain and windy as balls. Hello. Bikes are free now, yeah?
Yes, you are.
That's new, right? Newish?
About a year, something like
Cool.
that.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. The recently abolished toll, sunshine, and slow tourist car made crossing the bridge a walk in the park this time. The Washington side of the gorge was noticeably less pleasant, a necessary evil until the construction of the bike path completes the connection to Hood River. Steep basalt cliffs rise dramatically to the left of the highway, which create an excellent south-facing wall to cook you under. The traffic was pretty gnarly, and the shoulder was tiny. Sadly, this section of Washington Route 14 isn't half as bad as the section from Stevenson to Vancouver.
The button don't fucking work. Yeah, the button does not do shit.
There were some funky tunnels that I had to squeeze through. I kept riding down the gorge and past the campsite I originally planned to stay at. I was feeling good, so I decided to push on to a potential campsite near the town of Klickitat. I turned off Highway 14 to a pleasant back road that slowly climbed up the Klickitat River. The scenery was beautiful, and the grade was reasonable. There was an old railroad grade that I could have used, but it was missing a few bridges, and it was a lot chunkier than I think my road bike could handle. The mercury hit 36 degrees Celsius as I rolled into Klickitat, a highly western town. I enjoyed a refill of cold water from the general store's soda fountain. I accidentally tapped the lemonade button as I filled up my bladder, so the water had a hint of sweet lemon. A short jaunt down the road led me to the camping spot for the night, concluding the 160-kilometer first day of riding. I made dinner and explored the area.
There is such a strong smell of rotten eggs here. So this little spring that apparently is naturally carbonated. So that is interesting. Naturally fizzy. And there's a whole little old abandoned industrial complex here that used to make soda and dry ice, among other things, using this resource. That's pretty neat. And it just flows out. Flows down the road. and enters the Klickitat River just over here.
Some smoke from a brush fire rolled up the canyon as I got ready for bed.
I hope it doesn't get really gross and I have to ride in the smoke zone.
The smoke subsided by morning and I packed up and got ready to go. As I rolled out of camp, I realized that the spring had simply stopped running. Odd.
Yep, there's the springs. But they don't go this time of day.
The day started with a stunning scenic climb out of the canyon of the Klickitat River up to the Columbia River Plateau. Of the Cascades started to give way to open scrub and grassland as I emerged on the plateau. I reached the town of Goldendale by late morning and stopped at a local park for lunch. I continued climbing a tributary of the Klickitat River along Route 97. As I entered a more remote section of the route, I ran into another pedal-powered traveler. Around 2 o'clock, I crossed the Klickitat watershed to the watershed of the Yakima River. At this point, I was so far ahead of schedule that I was like, fuck it, and abandoned planned camping locations. The Yakima Valley with substantial rainstorm just a few minutes behind me. I made it to the valley floor and meandered my way through canal works and farms. Though it is a somewhat regular occurrence, I finally got some video of a proper dog encounter.
Go back. Go back. I trudged through some cow shit laden fields and finally arrived at the RV park I was shooting for. It was the epitome of a depressing suburbanite's vacation spot, but I was exhausted. I made friends with a couple from Calgary and got some rest. I climbed up out of the Yakima Valley, but not before another dog encounter. No! So now, right now it's a mixture between the scrubland grass smell, the sagebrush smell, and the cow shit in the valley behind me. A lot of cow shit in the valley behind me. I think this is like the top of the first little bump. Today we got 2,600 feet of climbing over 77 miles. It's not so bad. Should be less than all the other days. And because we pushed so hard on the first couple days, we are in good position to not have to push super hard to Spokane. It's very beautiful. I do worry about exposure today. I worry that at some point I'll have to like cower in a ditch like that to stay out of the sun for a few minutes. Although there's probably not going to be too many opportunities like that once the sun gets a little bit higher in the sky. So maybe under a culvert or a bridge, who knows?
Before long, I was out in the middle of nowhere. I would only see occasional patches of orchards and farms for the rest of the day. After a small stint in a rest spot for lunch, I crossed the mighty Columbia once again. I was skirting around the Tri-Cities on my way to a small state recreation site outside of the town of Othello. Now I was well on my way to Spokane. I stopped at an overlook to get a view of the Hanford sites, a series of nuclear reactors and test sites starting operation for the Manhattan Project. Now it's the most contaminated nuclear site on U.S. soil. When I went to leave, I noticed something equally disturbing.
I rolled up here and I was like, oh shit, what's going on over here? And I found the goat heads Look at that gnarliness. Look at that. Oh god, where is it? Like this shit right here. Oh, that is so gnarly. They are sharp. Yeah, those are the goat heads. Look at all that shit. So many of them. The fox shouldn't have walked over there. Yeah, that's sketchy. Playing a game called Hide Underneath the Cloud. We've caught up with the cloud now. We're gonna try and stay under it. We're almost to the front of it, so we gotta kind of slow down a little bit. Hide under the cloud. Also, goat heads are scary.
I descended into yet another heavily irrigated agricultural valley in the middle of an otherwise extremely arid region. I made my way through the maze of back roads and canal works to a campground on the banks of a small reservoir. In typical desert ag fashion, the lake had too much shmoo in it to swim safely. Day 4 started with me climbing a steep hill onto yet another plateau. The psychological battle with the goat heads continued.
Can't see him. I don't want to get too close. But freaking goat heads right there. All the way down the road. All the way back the road. Very abundant. I'm a little bit nervous on this like less traveled road. I think the highways maybe are better because they get either pulverized or picked up by trucks and stuff. You know, aren't able to like stay on the road, so I'm gonna like watch where I'm going real close, like make sure I'm not hitting any goat head seats, because that'd be fucking gnarly.
After spending the morning riding across a vast expanse of barren terrain, I crossed a main road that followed the railroad that I would soon be a passenger on towards Spokane. All day, iron behemoths carrying coal, oil, and grain chugged along next to me. Just outside the town of Lind, I saw evidence of America's once booming railroads. The BNSF main line runs under the crumbling remains of a viaduct that was once part of the Transcon line operated by the Milwaukee and St. Paul Railroad. The Milwaukee Road, as it was called, is now a bike path that extends from eastern Washington deep into the Rocky Mountains of Idaho. I decided to ride along the divided highway for a few kilometers to Ritzville. This saved me some distance and climbing, and it was safe enough with a large shoulder, but I fucking hate the noise and exhaust. I got off the gross road at Ritzville and continued east on the historic Route 10. turned off the road and headed to an RV campground by another small lake. The BNSF main line rolled by just across the water. As usual, the lake was festering with toxic algae. I only had to ride 72 kilometers to Spokane to catch the Amtrak at midnight that night. Time was not an issue, but I enjoyed a hefty tailwind. I raced an empty grain train into the town of Sprague and got some water at a little park. Trees returned to the landscape as I neared Spokane. I hopped onto some dirt roads that paralleled I-90. I had a blast, but the washboarding got a bit rough towards the end. Into Cheney and headed towards the Columbia River Plateau Rail Trail, which would spit me out in the heart of Spokane. It was a 2% downhill grade all the way to Spokane. That and the tailwind and the narrow railroad cut let me fly into town. About halfway to Spokane, I ran into a problem. There was a snippet of the trail blocked by railroad schmutz, and the detour was not a fun one. So after some deliberation, I did a wee bit of trespassing to connect the sections of trail. I waited to cross the clearing with the junction until the first loco had no line of sight to me. Then I crossed no man's land and made it to the fence that blocked off the rest of the trail. Luckily, the local meth heads had the courtesy of leaving me a nice gap in the fence.
I'm not bringing my bike down there. Oh. Plenty far. There we go. Boom. No problem.
I got back on the trail and rolled into Spokane, did some grocery shopping, and bummed around the town for a while I waited for my train. When it got dark, I waited in the train station. The Amtrak station didn't even open until 10 p.m., so technically I was waiting in the Greyhound station. While I waited, I reorganized my packing and made my bike ready for train storage. The train finally arrived only a little bit late in the darkest hours of the night. My mom bought a normal train ticket from Portland. I met her on the platform and we boarded the train and settled down for bed. We awoke in the Rocky Mountains of Montana. Our first big delay came just before breakfast service at the Elk Mountain Summit just before Whitefish. Turns out that our dining car had some gnarly maintenance issues. The Amtrak people inspected it and decided that they should call some BNSF engineers from Whitefish to take a look. We spent 2 hours on the siding waiting for the BNSF people to drive up there. They took a look at our dining car and said, "Yep, it's fucked." So we abandoned it on the siding and continued without it. When we got rolling again, I started working on this very film. Obviously, the observation car is the only sensible place to sit during the day to enjoy the natural light and scenery. No way were we going to sit in our stuffy coach seat. At Whitefish, the train picked up some Subway or Pizza Hut or some shit to appease all the boomers and the sleepers. We knew better than to depend on Amtrak to feed us, so we brought a little pot and a water boiler to make ramen and the like. After that, we blitzed up the middle fork of the Flathead River into Glacier National Park. We made it out into the prairies of Montana by nightfall. It rained for most of our transit across the plains, and it stayed mostly outside. We got into Chicago only 6 hours behind schedule, almost 3 days after we got onto the train. We had to spend a night in Chicago since our train to DC didn't depart until the next afternoon. We walked to our hotel and spent the next day exploring the city. We boarded our train to DC and sped east across the cornfields of Ohio. The next morning, we woke up surrounded by thick accents and beautiful Appalachian scenery. That evening, we hung out in the DC train station and caught the red-eye to Boston. We arrived in Boston just in time to wade through the horde of commuters. Then we did our laundry as we walked across the city from Boston South to Boston North. Boston was just okay. The bike shop wanted to charge me to use an Allen key. Meh. We caught the Downeaster and were on our way to Portland, Maine. The train rolled into Portland just after the sunset. There was some belligerent drunk who slept through his stop despite being woken and reminded by the conductor. I realized on this trip Portland wasn't actually the end of the line. We could have continued on the Downeaster 32 more kilometers to Brunswick, but this time we were happy to stay in a neato little hostel in town. I rode downtown and picked up some snacking foods. Then I met my mom at the hostel and conked out. I had 2 more long days of riding to Bar Harbor. I packed up all my stuff in the cute hostel and left the Forest City. I'd ridden this route pretty much exactly a year ago at the end of my cross-country trip, just this time it was backwards. The weather was excellent. Lots of people had the same idea, except I don't just ride on the nice safe roads. I had places to be, so I slogged through some suburban shit. I even got to feel good about passing some schmucks in their stupid cars. The scenery tended to be worth it. Remember that lemon water from way back in Klickitat? Well, turns out sugar water in a sack sitting in a warm bag for a week means mold. My water bladder was filled with thick, slimy mold. I spent a long-ass time in a Hannaford's bathroom scrubbing it. Safe to say, I stuck to my water bottle until I could deep clean that shit. I made my way into the hills to try and find a stealthy place to camp, but it was busy summer traffic. People were fucking everywhere. I loitered at this trailhead for a while, pondering where to camp and waiting for darkness.
So the deal is that Brenda, I ran into Brenda at the trailhead, and she's offered to let me camp in her yard down in Camden, which is the town that's just a couple miles downhill, big old downhill, down this road. And so that's really awesome, because my other option was kind of like maybe illegally camping on the side of that road there, and so I wasn't super stoked about that. But now I get to camp in the yard, so that's good. Above board. Yay.
A bit of a zoom into Camden. I took some time to explore the town. They had some sort of boat fest going on. Later that evening, I found Brenda and camped in her yard. The Maine coast is pretty scenic even if it's clogged with massholes and escalades for half the year. At least the bike laws are pretty good in Maine. Afternoon, I passed through Ellsworth and cruised down to the island. I rolled my bike right up to the front porch of my dorm and spent the day moving my minimal possessions into my room. I was in college, for now.